Hello, people. It is I again. Sorry for the hiatus, but it appears I've been very busy. Well, I have been very busy, and it's been the Christmas season. I have some good news. Um, I've had my own little case pop up, which is exciting. So I'll be able to hopefully take this to court and to trial, and if all being well, after I've presented my evidence and facts in the case to the court and had it judged in whatever capacity that seems fit, I'm hoping now I'll be able to go through it in some respects as to how I found the whole court experiences, the difficulties, and the things that went right, the things that went wrong, and how to access the courts in order to get justice. So this is kind of a little blessing because I was trying to help my friend with a divorce case, but it's obviously quite tricky in such a kind of a what do you call it, an emotional subject. So thankfully, something very silly happened to me. Nothing to worry about, and it just gives me a great opportunity to build a very strong case and take it to court, which will be interesting. So that's one good bit of news. So I might be very busy in the coming weeks. So you may not hear from me as much as I'd like to make videos. Yeah, so that should be fun. In the meantime, I'll try and pop out little videos as and when I can. But this one is in particular in relation to the rape video that we did. Was it Emily? Someone called Emily, I believe, if I remember rightly. It's on my video list anyway. So there's a lady called Emily who got Emily Shaw. Am I remembering that right? Emily Shaw got a rape claim done, and she's taken a private prosecution, asking for donations to take a private prosecution out to try and get justice, which is all good. But I just wanted to do a little video on the issue of rape and how rape itself means so many different things. And I was just reading this in my little Tomlin's Law Dictionary, and I just thought this is yet another example of a definition of rape that I hadn't come across. I'm just going to cross-reference it with a few other points, just to try and help people understand that the words that they're using need to be very concise. So, rape. I was just going through the R section in the Tomlin's book of rape, and it says a division of a country similar to that of the hundred. Now, the hundred is a load of lands up north. They used to call them the hundreds, where any debt against one was, if anyone got into debt, they would all be everyone within the hundred would be liable for that debt. It was a very communal kind of way of living, essentially. So you can understand that if one guy got into debt, everyone would be liable for that man's debt. So it was a big issue in the olden days of getting into debt. It just wasn't really allowed, frowned upon. It was almost a form of dishonour. So that's basically what 100 is. But often contained in more than hundreds and whatnot. So then you've got different examples of rape. So there are, Sussex is divided into 6 rapes. Now Sussex, don't giggle. South is sus, and sex just means like a half. Like, what sex are you? Are you male or female? What half are you? So that would be the south half is divided into 6 rapes. These rapes are incident to the county of Sussex, and then it just goes on to say, look, Yorkshire's got some rapes. There's rapes in Laos, so it's like it's a way of dividing territory here, which I hadn't actually come across, and this actually ties into, I believe, what is it here? Rape reeves. This is a good word. These formerly had their rape reeves. Now, rape reeves is related to a shire reeve, i.e. a sheriff. So where you'd have sheriffs looking after a county, the hundreds would have, or something similar or akin to 100, would have a rape reeve. Yeah, and then you had other people who had laves, and there was a laves reeve. So these are just like the shire, as in the area you live in, and the reef. Yeah, I just thought that was quite an interesting thing. So there's other types of sheriffs out there, depending on the territory or the boundaries of where they have jurisdiction. And going into here, we've got rape of the forest, which is basically the king's property. It's the forests are the trees. Wood is a natural resource that's quite important for shipbuilding, fire, animals, all kinds of stuff. So there's rape of the forest, obviously damaging the forest, which would be violence, some sort of violence against the forest. You're cutting down the forest. I would view that as. Now, rape of a woman, so some sort of violence against women, and this is where we come into more familiar territory. And I like this little definition here: an unlawful and carnal knowledge. So that's a knowing of. So you're using an unlawful and physical flesh. It's a very kind of almost like a religious word, like a carnivorous, carnivore, carnal. So it's about the flesh. An unlawful and carnal knowledge of a woman by force. So you're getting to know her intimate, fleshy details with unlawful means and against her will. A ravishment of the body and violent deflowering her. So that would be like taking her virginity. Yeah, so it used to be, I'll summarise this a lot, but essentially, where's Athel guy? He's a good old king. Here, Saxon king, Athelstan. So Athelstan's a good old Saxon king. And Athelstan is, he basically had it was punishable by death back in his days, which is quite nice. But obviously, when you have death as a punishment, it tends to mean the victims just get killed anyway. You know, there's no incentive to keep the rape victim alive if you're going to get killed yourself. So it's the same with theft, where theft was once punished with death. It's like, well, the thieves would then just kill everyone so that there's no witnesses, when really all they're doing is stealing. So it's not really, getting the balance of justice right has always been a bit tricky throughout the ages, and you'll probably establish that from here. So we've gone from killing them. And then I think William the Conqueror did something interesting where he chastised them. Was he chastised them? He neutered them, would cut their balls off, and took out an eye. Oh, there we go. Castration and loss of eyes. That's what William the Conqueror. That's fair enough. It's a pretty serious crime. Yeah. So there's also here about this touches into. Women have to report it straight away, and they need men to come along, and they need like the local justices of the peace to actually verify that she's been beaten, examine her body. It sounds like what they'd have to do just to make sure that it's obviously credible. But the woman would have to do that as soon as she can get to the next town, which is quite interesting. And then here, we've got a lovely phrase I've come across: nullum tempus occurrit regi, whatever the hell that means. It's Latin. I'm not trained in Latin, but you get the idea. Now this is really good because this is something Carl Lenzer says about you've got statute of limitations, and then you have certain things aren't subject to statute of limitations. And I quickly looked up this phrase. Let's see if I can find it. So nullum tempus occurrit regi. No time runs against the king. Now, I have said in a previous video about the king, and this book in particular has a really nice kind of description of the king. The king never dies. All right. As soon as one king dies, the next king inherits the title. Okay. It's like a house. It's a bit of property. So it's like a house, a card, a family heirloom, like a bit of china on your window ledge. As soon as someone dies, then it goes immediately to the next of kin. So it's exactly or the next in line to the throne in this case. So the king in that respect is, timeless. And this is where this phrase comes from, is that, as one monarch dies, it's passed over immediately to another. So no time runs against the king. Okay, so there's no time runs against the king. So if a crime happens within the kingdom or in the king's domain, the king, as soon as the king becomes aware of it, there's obviously action for a trial, which is quite a nice thing. And there's also something about this. This is 1250s, okay? Now, legal memory starts at 1275. So a lot of the Latin terms that we find very early on and are still used in many courts of law, it appears to me, and I'm becoming more and more convinced of this, that Latin is the first proper written language that I'm aware of that England started using. And a lot of the priests that were sent over to obviously document and recount the Bible and whatnot, and become aides to the king, in particular the monarchs, I think Edward the Confessor was the one who actually learnt Latin and wrote down some instructions as to how to run a good kingdom after learning Latin. So all the old kings couldn't speak. But this is why I'm quite interested in that. Anything that's before 1275 is time immemorial, as referred to by the legal society. They call it before legal memory, as in before their society started documenting things in some sort of early parliament in 1275. So I'm becoming more and more keen to use kind of, or refer, obviously we don't use Latin because it's not a native tongue, but in terms of directing court is into a particular idea, if your idea marries up with what the like a Latin phrase would be here, then you would square bracket something like this and reference it to the court, or maybe just put it in brackets, because you're not really referencing something that can't be referenced because it's time immemorial. But the court, the justices are trained in these terms. So no time runs against the king. But in the same vein, we have a 40-day limit that the woman have to get their butt to some sort of judiciary, some sort of justice of the peace to get herself examined, and ideally the sooner the better. And this is something I found also with my case, is that there's I think in criminal courts you have 6 months. You have to file or lay in information within 6 months of the thing happening, which kind of look, if you're going to do something about it, you have to lay it before a magistrate. But the good thing is, once you've laid it, there's no time constraints as such. If you put like a stay on your summons while you get your case ready, because your case might be incredibly complicated, and so it might take you 5 years to get your case together, to get all the little bits of minute information. But as long as you've notified the judiciary by laying in information or serving paper upon the clerks of the court, then that is classed as filed with them. They've had notice of it. They've been presented with the documents in relation to the case. Yeah, so that was one example of our little bit of rape and bringing in statute of limitations, as it's sometimes referred to, and how that can be a limit to your case, and sometimes it isn't related to your claim. The law they said that. This is quite good. It goes on a lot about the age of rape and under 10-year-olds being particularly like an interesting subject, which it seems to be mostly aimed at under 10s and under 12s, which is quite an interesting concept. Obviously, misbehaviour has been around, is as old as the hills, and consent doesn't matter whether it's forced, duress. If the woman doesn't fight, it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't rape. There's all kinds of interesting things that come into this. Yeah, so you need to, but that's essentially one angle in terms of rape. It goes on to what is this? Yes, if the woman yields to the violence and consented either after the fact or before, in such consent was forced by fear of death or duress, or that she was common strumpet, whatever that means, strumpet, for she is still under the protection of the law and may be forced. But it was anciently held that no rape to force a man's own concubine. This is once you're married, there's no such rape. Oh, and also here it mentions something about it's something in Islamic religion about just to bring back that there's quite a lot of Abrahamic religions have quite some similarities sometimes, and here actually on the right side, I'm sure if you read through it, freeze the screen, have a read through, that it was possible, or it was offered at least to the rape victim to say, look, if you marry this man, then we can undo the rape, undo the controversy, which obviously is an interesting concept. But that's something that still is offered in Muslim world, but that's fallen well out of favour many centuries ago in Western culture. But it's just nice to bring over some similarities with these religions that share some text going back into the Old Testament. So going back to some little things here, I wanted to first of all show David Starkey once again. Let's have a little listen to Starkey on rape.
The second issue is, I think we've got ourselves into a hopeless confusion on the whole question of rape. The word rape means violence. That is the Latin root. That is how it has always existed in English. That is how it has always been understood. What we have tried to do is to take that word with all its terrible associations and apply it to a whole series of much more awkward, much more difficult to establish, much more contested and contentious sexual encounters by focusing on this issue of consent, which so often boils down, as it did exactly in this case, to his word against her word.
Brilliantly said. Yeah. Again, coming back to, well, that's a, well, you know, it's your word against someone else's word. You know, this is why it's so dangerous for women to be alone with a man if they do decide to go crazy and rape one another, or, you know, either way. Obviously, it's not more likely that the man would rape the woman. Yeah, and this is something I highlighted in the Emily Shaw case as well, because, you know, when you're waking up drugged in a hotel room with a man next to you and no witnesses, no memory, it's, in a way, it's almost like the perfect crime, which is why you have to be so careful. Always have a friend with you, you know, always have someone who knows where you're going and expects you back at a certain time, so that they can at least give you a phone call or get the alarm bells ringing as soon as possible. Now, going on here, I just want to go to the end here. So again, rape, just pause the screen and have a read. So there's a noun, and a verb. Again, this is all rooting back to the Latin root. And I've highlighted this in the Emily Shaw. This word here. Here we are. To disgrace a woman, and I think there's another. I think there was another one, isn't it? Excuse my. Yeah. Oh, here we are. This one. Stuprare, which is to defile, to ravish, to violate, which is more specific. But rape again has many, many wide connotations. And another thing is rape, as in rape seed. Yeah, this is something I highlighted before as well. Rapeseed oil is you rape the seed, as in you use violence against the seed. You crush it up, you smash it up, and you get your lovely canola oil. You get all your colza oil. You know, you get all the cooking oils that we use, which isn't from sunflower seeds. All the vegetable oil pretty much comes from this oilseed rape. And then you've got another thing as well, which is the rapier. Yeah, a rapier. Yeah, it's a thing for violence. It's a tool of violence. Yeah, and this is all comes from the rapier, to use violence, to use force, to kill someone. That's why a rapier is called a rapier. It's got nothing to do with sexual deviances, I suppose, if that's the right way of saying it. I just thought it was quite interesting just to again highlight the word rape is always an interesting one, and it has to be maybe more concise. I think sexual assault is another one, but again, sexual half would be like a half assault, so assault of a sexual nature. It's difficult to define because the word we're so used to using is rape. I mean, everyone knows what you're talking about when you say rape, but when you bring it down to its root word, you go into a judiciary meeting, I mean, they'll know what you're saying, but it's just so fascinating how this word rape has been misused, and, you know, it's been misassociated with what it actually is. Which, I like the violate. It is a violate and disgrace. You disgrace a woman, obviously, if you do such an act, and you violate her barrier, if you like. Well, not her barrier, but, you know, her private space, her right to be left alone and to choose who she does and doesn't sleep with. Words that relate to those, which will come back to Latin as well. So rape, yeah, is an interesting one. I think that's about all I wanted to do. Just a little short video, just to see how a little bit of history there. Well, there's quite a lot of history there condensed in 15-minute video. But this is just the kind of things you do from reading. You get a nice history and understanding. And even someone as wise as David Starkey has pointed this out to the masses on a national TV show. Say rape is violence, guys. We need to get our head around this, you know. And like mashing it into all kinds of sexual misadventures, if that's the right way of saying it, is technically not correct. And particularly here, it relates to mostly infants. So yeah. What word do we use? What word do we use?